High on Everest, after nearly a century of silence, the ice is finally giving up secrets. A single frozen boot emerges from the snow. Inside, a name: Irvine. And with it, the chance to solve mountaineering's greatest mystery. More than 100 years ago, two men set out to do the impossible, to stand where no human had ever stood before, the very top of Mount Everest. It was 1924. George Mallory, a climbing legend; Sandy Irvine, just 22 years old, a young prodigy with a fearless heart. Together, they chased a dream that would push them beyond anything they had ever known, testing their strength, their courage, and their fate. On June 8th, they were spotted, high above the clouds, still climbing strong. And then, they were gone, swallowed by the mountain, lost forever. No one ever saw them alive again. But now, almost a century later, the mountain has finally given up one of its secrets. High on Everest's frozen slopes, something has surfaced from the melting ice. A single boot. Inside it, a wool sock, yellowed with age. And stitched into the fabric were two letters: A.C. Irvine. Could it really be him? Could this frozen clue finally solve one of the greatest mysteries in mountaineering history? Did George Mallory and Sandy Irvine reach the top of the world before anyone else, only to vanish on the way down, forgotten by history? For nearly 100 years, the world has been asking the same question. Now, we might finally be getting an answer. Before we find out what really happened, a quick favor. If you love true survival stories, lost mysteries, and the secrets hidden in the world's most dangerous mountains, hit that subscribe button. I'm just getting started and on the road to my first 1,000 subscribers. Now, let's go back to Mallory and Irvine, back to where this story truly begins. Sandy Irvine wasn't like other young men. Born in the quiet town of Birkenhead, he grew up in a world of tradition and knowledge. But even as a boy, Sandy was different. While others were learning to ride bikes, he was building complex machines. By the time World War I broke out, he was still just a teenager, but he had already invented a way for machine guns to fire through spinning airplane blades. A schoolboy solving problems that military engineers couldn't. Brilliant, fearless, born for something greater. And he wasn't just a genius, he was a powerhouse. At Shrewsbury School and later Oxford, Sandy dominated as an elite rower, strong, disciplined, unstoppable. In 1923, he helped Oxford beat Cambridge in one of Britain's biggest sporting events, a rare and stunning victory. A young man who could outthink engineers and outpace Olympians. But just 1 year later, he wouldn't be in a lab or in a boat. He'd be standing at the edge of the world, staring up at the deadliest mountain on Earth, Mount Everest. In 1923, Sandy Irvine faced his first real test. He joined an expedition to Spitsbergen, a frozen island deep in the Arctic, north of Norway. It was brutal, bitter winds, endless glaciers, and bone-cracking cold. Most men struggled just to survive, but Sandy thrived. When stoves broke down, he fixed them. When gear failed, he rebuilt it on the fly. Calm, smart, unstoppable, even when the Arctic tried to break him. And among the men on that expedition was someone who mattered, someone that was watching Irvine closely: George Mallory. Mallory had a plan. He was preparing for a third, and maybe final, attempt to conquer Everest. But Mallory knew strength alone wouldn't be enough. He needed someone who could handle the one thing that couldn't fail: the oxygen systems. Bulky, temperamental, and deadly if they broke down. Sandy was the perfect man for the job. Mallory noticed he was smart, calm, and fearless under pressure. Despite Irvine's youth, and the fact he had never been that high before, Mallory made his choice, a decision that would change history. He chose Sandy. On February 29, 1924, a leap day, as if time itself paused to watch, Sandy Irvine boarded the SS California in Liverpool. His destination, the Himalayas. His mission, to do what no human being had ever done: to stand on the highest point on Earth. The road ahead wasn't just hard, it was almost mythical. towering peaks, brutal storms, and a mountain that had already defeated the world's strongest climbers. Their gear was primitive by today's standards: thick wool coats, heavy leather boots, canvas tents that barely held back the wind. But one thing mattered more than anything else: the oxygen. It was massive, unpredictable, dangerous. Above 8,000 meters, a working oxygen system could mean the difference between reaching the summit and never coming back. That's why Sandy was there, because when machines failed in impossible places, Sandy Irvine didn't just fix them, he made them work. On June 6, 1924, Mallory and Irvine stepped out of Camp 4, 26,800 feet above sea level. The air was thin, the world below them felt like a distant memory. Only ice, wind, and the summit of Everest lay ahead. 2 days later, at exactly 12:50 p.m., expedition member Noel Odell caught a fleeting glimpse through a break in the clouds. He saw two tiny figures, high up on the mountain, moving strong, climbing toward the top. And then, the clouds closed in, the mountains swallowed them, and the silence began. They never came back. No signal, no sound, not even a single trace. Search parties climbed higher, risking their own lives, desperate to find any sign of them. For weeks they searched the icy slopes, battling storms and brutal cold. But Everest gave them nothing. It was as if the mountain had simply swallowed them whole and buried their story in silence. 9 years passed. Then, in 1933, a single clue finally surfaced from the snow. A climber named Percy Wynne Harris discovered an ice axe at 27,760 feet, just a whisper from the summit. It belonged to one of them, Mallory or Irvine. But the axe told no story. It offered no answers, no closure. They had come heartbreakingly close. And with that, the mystery only deepened. Did Mallory and Sandy make it? Were Mallory and Sandy, not Hillary and Norgay, the first humans to stand on top of the world almost 30 years earlier? There was one item that could answer everything: a camera, a small Kodak vest pocket carried by Sandy Irvine and lent to him by fellow climber Howard Somervell. If they had reached the summit, the proof would be there, frozen in time, locked inside a roll of film. Sandy Irvine remained missing for decades, but in 1999, a team led by American climber Conrad Anker made a shocking discovery. High on Everest's slopes, they found the body of George Mallory, face down, arms outstretched, as if still reaching for the summit. He was dressed in full climbing gear. A rope injury around his waist suggested that he and Irvine had been tied together when tragedy struck. But there was no camera, no sign of Sandy. Mallory's goggles were tucked into his pocket, hinting that he may have fallen during a nighttime descent. And the small photograph of his wife, the one he had promised to leave at the top, was missing. Had they made it? Had they stood on the roof of the world, only to vanish before anyone could know? The world held its breath, waiting for answers. But Everest stayed silent once again. For years, the rumors never stopped. Some said Chinese climbers had found Irvine's body back in 1975 and quietly removed it. Others believed he was still out there, buried deep beneath Everest's shifting glaciers, lost in the ice forever. But no matter how many stories were told, no real answers ever came. No truth ever rose from the snow. Until September 2024, exactly 100 years after Sandy Irvine disappeared, a documentary crew filming for National Geographic was crossing the central Rongbuk Glacier. They weren't even looking for Irvine, but on a clear, crisp morning, something caught their eye: a single boot jutting out from the ice. Then, a sock, torn, weathered by time, and stitched into the fabric in faded red thread, was a name the world hadn't seen in nearly a century: a C. Irvine. They had found him. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Some of the crew gasped, others cried. Jimmy Chin, the expedition leader, would later call it a surreal, electric moment, like staring directly into history. For Irvine's family, especially his great-niece, historian Julie Summers, it was overwhelming. She had spent decades keeping his story alive. And now, at last, a piece of him had come home. But with the discovery came more questions. Why was Irvine found so far below where Mallory had fallen? Had they been roped together and torn apart in an avalanche? Had Irvine fallen first, possibly carrying the camera that could still rewrite history? If so, that camera may still be out there, frozen in ice, waiting. Glaciologists believe the boot and sock only appeared recently, slowly revealed as the glacier melted. A century-long exhale, uncovering secrets the mountain had hidden for almost 100 years. If more follows, we might one day find the most important artifact in Everest's history, maybe even the camera that could change everything. Did Mallory and Irvine reach the summit in 1924? Did they conquer the highest mountain on Earth, only to vanish before the world could ever know? We still don't have the answer, but one thing is certain. The mountain isn't done telling this story. High on Everest, beneath layers of snow and silence, the truth may still be waiting. A lost camera, maybe a final photograph, a story frozen in time. Did Mallory and Irvine reach the top before anyone else? We may never know, but the mountain remembers, and as the ice melts, so do the secrets. This isn't just history, it's a mystery still unfolding. Somewhere, buried high above the clouds, the final answer is still out there. If you want to follow the clues and hear what the mountain reveals next, subscribe, because this story, it's not over yet.